Building something special in the college football world takes time. It's very rare that a new head coach can step into a role and completely change a program overnight, and oftentimes it takes years to even see progress in the win column. So when Willie Fritz took over the job at Tulane, he understood that this project would take time. After not playing in a major bowl game in over 80 years, Tulane made program history this past season in an unlikely way. After winning 2 games in 2021, the Green Wave finished the 2022 season with 12 wins and a Cotton Bowl victory, completing the greatest turnaround in college football history. And in today's video, we'll be looking at the 80-year rebuild that brought Tulane its best ever season. This is the Rise of Tulane Football. Looking at the history of Tulane, it might be one of the more interesting program histories in the entire country. This was a team that used to compete in the SEC, and depending on who you ask, Tulane could be considered a powerhouse. The Green Wave experienced most of their program success in the late 1920s and early 1930s, where they had multiple seasons with no losses or just 1 loss. They made it to prominent bowl games with 2 Sugar Bowl appearances and a Rose Bowl appearance as well, winning the 1934 Sugar Bowl under Ted Cox. At one point, they were projected to win the national championship and had the highest attendance in the entire conference. Things were going great from 1929 to 1949, but following this golden age of Green Wave football, the program hit a wall hard. A decade of actions both on and off the field saw Tulane in a much different spot than it was used to. In 1951, then President Rufus Harris decided to cut back on the number of football scholarships from 100 to 75, cut the salaries of staff and coaches, and limited its coaches' ability to scout talent. Tulane also made changes to degree plans, as it made physical education a minor, which was a problem for a football team that had the majority of its players be PE majors. The result? The rest of the SEC taking laps around Tulane. The other schools began to produce more on the field and got better talent. From 1952 to 1965, the team would win just 16 of 92 conference games, and on December 31st of 1964, the university announced that they would be leaving the SEC to become an independent, with it being reported that the leaders at the school didn't see it as an athletic powerhouse anymore. The result of this decision created a long major bowl drought for the once prominent football team. Many coaches tried, in fact 9 of them did, but all of them couldn't produce on the field, and it wasn't really all their fault. After leaving the SEC, Tulane just wasn't set up to have a successful football program. There were some good years from 1964 to 1996, but nothing better than 9 wins, which came twice. Regardless of who was there, the conditions surrounding the university and the team couldn't provide for consistent consecutive seasons at all. The school competed as an independent for many years and lost out on a lot of conference revenue and national attention that they would have otherwise got from the SEC. Then, in 1997, Tulane struck gold on its next head coach hire. They decided to give Auburn offensive coordinator Tommy Bowden a chance to right the ship, and he did exactly that. His first year in charge in 97 saw the team go 7-4 behind the stellar play of quarterback Sean King. Sean took a big jump from his sophomore to junior campaign, and his jump would be huge for the following season. The dual threat helped to lead the second best offense in the nation in 1998, where they averaged 45 points a game. King threw for 3,500 yards and 32 touchdowns and added 600 more yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. What the team as a whole was able to accomplish this season would become the best year in program history and one of the best group of 5 teams of all time. By week 2, Tulane was already receiving votes for a spot in the AP Top 25. After 3 straight victories, they earned that spot back in the Top 25 by the 4th game against Southern Miss. None of this changed the rest of the way, as the Green Wave went a perfect 11-0, being ranked as high as number 10 in the AP poll. Despite all of this success, they didn't receive a major bowl invite and would play unranked BYU in the Liberty Bowl, who they defeated to go 12-0. The problem with Tulane that season was that their schedule just wasn't tough enough, and their best win came against a Rutgers team that finished with just 5 wins. Following this successful season, Tommy left for Clemson and Sean King graduated and went to the NFL. With that, the new success and momentum quickly dissipated. The program turned to Chris Scelfo to lead the Green Wave into a new era, one as an established member of Conference USA, and get back to winning conference titles. But for his tenure from 1999 to 2006, Tulane's best finish would come in 2002, where they went 8-5. This would be the only season that they made it to a bowl game, and they did win it and sent multiple players to the league, including quarterback JP Losman. But the reality was that this still wasn't good enough. Then you can enter in Bob Toledo, who served as the head coach from 2007 to 2011, and Curtis Johnson from 2012 to 2015, but the best finish was 7 wins, and that was their only winning season in this time frame. Almost 40 head coaches in Tulane history, and the results hadn't been there in almost 80 years. Then, the tides turned once again. Tulane made a jump from Conference USA to the American Athletic Conference, a move that, although kept them in the group of 5, meant that they would receive more national exposure and more revenue each season. But they needed someone to guide them now, and the pressure was on to nail the next hire. They ultimately rolled with Georgia Southern head coach Willie Fritz to lead the team. Fritz had been in the college ranks for a few decades and had proven that he could be a leader regardless of where he was. He coached at Blinn College, Central Missouri, Sam Houston State, and Georgia Southern. At Blinn, he won 2 titles. At Central Missouri, he compiled 97 wins over a 13-year career. At Sam Houston, he made it to the playoffs in 3 of his 4 seasons there, and at Georgia Southern, he led the program to an undefeated season in conference play in their inaugural FBS season. The first 2 years of Fritz's tenure were in line with what Tulane had experienced before, a pair of sub-500 finishes. But in 2018, Fritz got the train going. From 2018 to 2020, the Green Wave would finish all 3 seasons with at least 6 wins, and they made it to 3 consecutive bowl games, the first time in program history. Competing in the AAC meant that they needed an offense that could put up points consistently, and over this 3-year stretch, they did just that. While passing was the awe of the conference, Tulane became one of the better teams in the conference at running the football, which has become a staple for the school. In each of the 3 seasons, Tulane consistently ranked among the best in the nation in terms of rush yards per game. In 2018, running back Darius Bradwell ran for over 1,100 yards, and the Green Wave averaged 218 yards a game. In 2019, they had 6 players rush for at least 200 yards on the season and were top 10 in the nation in rush yards. In 2020, Tulane again finished in the top 20 in rush yards per game, matching their total from 2018. Those great running performances allowed for the offense to perform as a top 35 offense in the country, where they hit that feat twice in 2019 and 2020. In this time frame, Tulane had proven to be a competitive team that could also get the job done, and Fritz helped to turn around the program in this time frame already. Tulane ended the 2018 season with a 5-1 record after starting off at 2-5, which included them convincingly winning their bowl game over Louisiana Lafayette. The 2019 season was the opposite. They started hot and ended cold, but the end result was still a convincing bowl win, this time over Southern Miss. And during the challenging 2020 campaign, it was an up and down season that included 3 close losses, but Tulane managed to make it to the postseason. With this 3-year stretch filled with momentum and progress, 2021 was expected to be the year that the program made that big jump. What ensued was one of the worst teams in all of the FBS, a 2-10 finish that saw the team only beat 1 FBS opponent in South Florida. This campaign was a painful one as Tulane immediately opened up the season unable to play at home for weeks due to Hurricane Ida, and there were 5 one-score losses. The overall product on the field wasn't good enough. On offense, there were 3 games where they scored less than 14 points. The defense also didn't perform either, and after firing their defensive coordinator the year before, they were in the bottom 10% in the country in points per game and gave up over 400 yards a game. It was a disappointing year, but the program had some promising pieces who were ready to break out on offense and gave them the potential to get back to what worked previously. Quarterback Michael Pratt had thrown for over 20 touchdowns in back-to-back years and was wanted by many programs as a transfer. Running back Ty J. Spears had averaged over 6 yards a carry in his previous 3 seasons and was beginning to take the reins of the starting role. Both of those players returned and they would be key pieces for the future, and instead of accepting a potential rebuild, Fritz and company got to work. In the offseason, they garnered 10 transfers in the transfer portal and brought in a new offensive coordinator in Central Missouri head coach Jim Savada to fix their issues. This hire wasn't due to production, but rather, Fritz felt that Jim was a good individual and therefore a good fit for this position. But just weeks before camp was set to begin, the offensive reins changed and the play calling keys were handed to tight ends coach Slade Nagel after practices in the spring weren't up to what Fritz wanted. The result? One of the best scoring offenses in the entire country. Tulane went back to its core of being a run-driven team with inside zone schemes and heavy play action. the Green Wave shifted to using more multiple tight end sets to take advantage of the skill that they had, lining up in 12 personnel on 40% of snaps, which was 11th most in the country. Defensively, the Green Wave ran more zone coverage this year, and that helped to propel the defense to one of the best pass defenses in the country. The season started off with two 40-plus point games on offense before the Green Wave went onto the road against Kansas State. The Wildcats were heavily favored, and the game ended up being a defensive affair. Trailing 10-7 entering the fourth quarter, Tulane scored the final 10 points of the game behind two fourth down stops on defense to secure the upset in Manhattan. But the hype quickly came crashing down the following game as the Green Wave suffered a 3-point loss to a Southern Miss team that they outgained in yards, first downs, and time of possession. The loss didn't completely derail their season, as the next 3 games were all victories, where they defeated Houston, Eastern Carolina, and South Florida. Following that win streak, Tulane jumped back into the top 25, coming in at number 25, and defeated Memphis and Tulsa in back-to-back weeks in convincing fashion. The following week would be a prime matchup against the ranked UCF, a game showcased on ESPN2 and would go down to the wire, but UCF ultimately prevailed 38-31. And now Tulane had to win out to capture a conference title, and that's exactly what they did. They defeated SMU and then went on the road to Cincinnati and defeated them thanks to a late touchdown catch by Deuce Watts to go 7-1 in conference play and earn the right to compete for a championship. Their opponent was UCF. In the rematch, we got 2 of the best games from Michael Pratt, who threw for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Tyjae Spears, who ran for 199 yards and a touchdown in a 45-28 victory. With this win, Tulane cemented themselves as the best group of 5 team in the country, earning the right to play in the Cotton Bowl, which would be the most prestigious bowl they've played in almost 80 years. And standing between them and more hardware would be the Heisman winner Caleb Williams and the USC Trojans. And just like the story of turning around their team in one season, Tulane battled and came back after trailing 45-27 late in the game thanks to some late heroics from both sides of the ball. And at the blow of the final whistle, after the confetti came flying in, reality set in that this became one of the greatest turnarounds in college football history. A team that won 2 games the year prior went 12-2. Defeating the best teams in the group of 5 and capping it off with a victory over a very talented squad that, had it not lost in their conference title game, would have been a playoff team. Although this team didn't go undefeated like the Sean King era, this felt like one of the best teams in program history. Michael Pratt left his mark on the university, throwing for over 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns, while Tyjae Spears ran for over 1,500 yards to power the 22nd best offense in the nation, and the defense stepped up and gave up just over 150 passing yards a game. Every member on this team, whether it's a player or a staff member, should be proud of what they accomplished because everybody contributed to the overall success of this group to accomplish something that had seemed impossible for teams prior. The future of Tulane football looks as bright as ever, and with Willie Fritz at the helm, anything is possible. This has been the Rise of Tulane Football. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, and as always, I will see you guys next time.